All right, Mets fans, it's that time again. It's to talk about another piece of you-know-what game you call this one, as the Mets drop their series to one of the worst teams in baseball and the St. Louis Cardinals. And at this point, one of the worst teams in baseball only means so much because the Mets are not far above them. The Cardinals have 29 wins on the season. The Mets have 33. It's potato. Again, a true embarrassment is what this club has been for the vast majority of this season. And it was on full display once again today. And that is exactly why I'm not only going to recap this ball game, but I'm going to rant too, because I'm not only fed up with this club, I expect nothing from them at this point. They have continued to not only disappoint, they have continued to heartbreak on a day-to-day, night-to-night basis. And I want to know your reactions in the comments below right now on what has been a beautiful Father's Day, aside from this shit show you call a ball game. Pardon my French. Again, shout out to all the amazing dads out there. Hope you guys have had a great day celebrating the day with your daughters, with your sons, with your own fathers or whoever it may be. But seriously, that's the only upside is this holiday, because what is not an upside is the Metropolitans as they falter in their series finale to the Cardinals by a final score of 8-7. If you're wondering how was this such a roller coaster back and forth game, let's dive into it. Cookie Carrasco, more like an effing burnt cookie, which is Cookie. Again, as much as I love the guy and have no ill will against him, Carrasco is cooked. He is burnt. He is done. He needs to stop being the pitcher in this rotation. The Mets have no consistency in this rotation whatsoever. He goes 3 innings of 5 earned today. Surely that's the length that we were going for, right? So before you know it, the Mets are in a 5-1 hole throughout the first 2 innings of this ball game after Francisco Lindor initially cut the lead, the deficit, to only 1 with his first home run of the game. A first home run since being a father of 2 now. Shout out to you, Frankie, on this Father's Day. But then right away, again, they get the runs right back. It's a 5-1 Cardinals lead. It then ultimately gets really close. It becomes 5-4, thankfully, because Eduardo Escobar is able to have a triple and drive in some runs. Brandon Nimmo is able to have a double, drive in some runs. So the Mets make it a 5-4 ball game, right? And then it becomes 6-4. John Curtis gives up the run the first inning that he comes in relief. Again, John Curtis, I like him, but he's one of those guys that shouldn't be in the bullpen. He's only here because the Mets don't have any arms. Then it's a continued back and forth until we get later on in the ball game. Tommy Pham with a 2-run ding-dong. I cannot begin to tell you how happy I am to be proven wrong about Tommy Pham's greatness. He has been an absolute stud for this team. His slugging ways continue over the past 3+ weeks now. He's been one of the better sluggers in baseball, and he ties the ball game 7-7. And this is where things get even that more frustrating. It's a 7-7 ball game against one of the worst teams in baseball that shouldn't be happy to begin with, thanks to, again, what you call a piece of you-know-what, which has been this pitching staff. But the Mets had the offense, and then in the 8th on the pitching-wise, Buck decides to opt with David Robertson in the 8th inning. Guess who he's facing? Not the top of the order, the bottom of the order. Then he decides to opt for Adam Ottavino instead of throwing Robertson out there after he only pitched around an 8-pitch 8th, and Ottavino faces Arenado and faces the heart of the order for the Cardinals. And what happens? Arenado hits an absolute bomb to give the Cardinals an 8-7 lead, and in typical Mets fashion, they end up losing said ball game by a final score of 8-7. Jordan Hicks, the flamethrower, that's touching 104 on the gun, striking out guys like no tomorrow, gain easy outs against the Mets on the second consecutive day. The Mets just lost a series to the St. Louis Cardinals, a team that right now is sitting, 29-40 something. They have been horrendous, but the Mets too have been horrendous. They have not won a series now since June 1st. They have been, if I'm not mistaken, they have lost 11 of their past 14 games. They're 12.5 out of first. They're 5.5 out of the wild card. And while the season is not done necessarily, this team is in panic mode. I'm starting to get in panic mode. This team is 5 games below 500, and I do not blame any Mets fan or their mother whatsoever if they truly feel that this season may start to become lost, because how this team stands right now, between the poor decision-making led by Buck Showalter that we have seen consistently. Yes, he's not at fault for everything on the pitching front and the lack of depth that he has in the bullpen. However, he is at fault for doing nonsense like having Robertson out against the bottom of the order against the Cardinals in the 8th, and then allowing Adam Ottavino, who, if I'm not mistaken, has not been nearly as good, nearly as consistent as Robertson this year, to throw him in the 9th and have him face Nolan, who already was having a strong game. How does that make any sense? But again, between the inconsistency on the coaching staff, between the poor roster construction, between the mismanagement of players, this team is a steaming pile of you-know-what right now. That is exactly what they have been. So for anyone to say, Tyler, how are you still supporting this team? I'm always going to support this club, no matter what. I'm going to go in the ringer for them. I'm going to go through hell and back for this club. That's what I signed up for. Would I be lying? I'm not going to lie. I didn't expect to be in the ringer like this at this point in the season with Steve Cohen. I'm going to be honest. I know Steve has to be fuming and pissed right now. Something has to give. Something has to change. A statement needs to be made because there are zero, pardon my French, guys, again, for the kiddos out there, put on the earmuffs, parental advisory. I apologize, but there are zero fucking excuses for this Mets team to continue to roll out this club right now, to not bring reinforcements, to not try to make any external moves sooner rather than later. If they give a flying you-know-what about going anywhere this year. How do you lose 8-7 to the Cardinals and drop a series to them? We got a lot to talk about this week, Mets fans. We got a lot to get into. We're going to be doing, I don't know if we're going to be doing our podcast because it's Father's Day today. Rex busy with the kids. Joe is going to be busy. So I don't know when the next podcast episode is going to be. I feel like we need to do a stream soon regardless, even if it's separate from our post-game shows. We'll, of course, have our post-game show content out on the channel this week as always. But we are entering territory with this Mets team that as much as I have been looking at, okay, what did the Braves do in 2021, right? Where they had a poor first half and then rallied around the trade deadline. What did the Nationals do in 2019, right? Where they were horrendous in the first half. No chance they were making playoffs, right? And then, of course, they went on to win the World Series. What did the Phillies do last year around this time? But even with all those things being said, as much as I want to convince myself that the Mets will be able to dig themselves out of a hole in a very similar fashion, it's becoming harder and harder to wrap my head around that potential possibility with how piss poor this team has been and how they have nothing ever in unison. When they have the pitching, they don't have the offense. When they have the offense, they don't have the pitching. This team right now they're a shit show. The New York Metropolitans right now are a shit show, and something has to give if they have any flying you-know-what of giving a damn about this season and going anywhere. They need to make decisions, and they need to make them soon, and Steve, I know, is pissed off. So I'm really hoping that if this has been a spiral. I can't even say that if this continues, that something changes. It needs to change because it's been continuing. It's been continuing for this Mets team. They're 33-38 on the season, guys. They're 33-38 on the season. They have around 100 or less than 100 games left in the season right now. They're going nowhere at this rate. Absolutely nowhere. And they have been nothing short of an embarrassment to follow, let alone cover throughout the entire course of this 162 thus far, in which before you know it, we're going to be at the halfway mark of the season, and then we're going to be at the trade deadline. The trade deadline is in the beginning of August. Trade season will begin as soon as we get into July. Something has to give. Things need to change because right now, my faith in this club and doing anything this year is dwindling more and more by the day. They have not proven it in recent years that they can make the proper trade deadline acquisitions, let alone consider them. This team is in turmoil right now, guys. So for everyone that is really, getting to the point where they're not only fed up, but they don't even want to watch him, I don't blame you. Because if it wasn't for the fact that I have, again, the luxury of covering this Mets team, which, again, is hard for days like this, but if it wasn't for the fact that I have the luxury of covering this team for a living, I would not be watching them as consistently as I do. Because that is how frustrating, how agonizing it is to watch a club that has talent, that has pieces, but are clearly missing some, clearly have holes, and nothing is being properly addressed. And just when you think you have things going right, the manager is making some head-scratching moves that, in a case like today, you could argue was going to make or break the ball game. Who would have knows what would have happened if Adam Ottavino pitched against the bottom of the order and Robertson faced Arenado? But again, we're never going to know. The same way that, again, I can't harp too much because at the end of the day, Carrasco putting up a 5 spot is the bigger issue to begin with. But things need to change and need to happen fast, or this Mets team is going to continue to dig themselves into a hole that they will not be able to dig themselves out of.